Publisher of the Greenwich Journal and the Salem Press, and we are out and about. You can get issues at Hannaford's and Stewart's and wherever else you normally see the paper, Cumberland Farms, bunch of places. So this is the late June issue. We come out with 2 issues of each paper twice a month. So 4 papers altogether a month. So we're pretty much a weekly if you add it all together. But to save money, we print the Salem Press and the Greenwich Journal at the same time, and they share some common pages, give or take. So this is the cover of the Greenwich Journal, and I have to decide, I do the cover last. And as I'm laying it out, I decide, all right, what merits being on the cover? What might actually move newspapers? It's actually counterintuitive. A lot of people think this is the layout, so ignore everything over here and over here. Those are just workspaces where I can move things around. I can, move boxes and use them for various things. These are just workspaces. So, what makes the cover? So I do the cover last, and I update. I put late June or whatever the date is, and the issue number and the edition number. In the history of this paper, we've put out 9,337 of them. So, and I put out, some of those. So I've been in the history of this beloved newspaper. An interesting thing about the Greenwich Journal is it's never been owned by someone who doesn't live in Greenwich. So it's had a ton of publishers since 1842. It had a bunch of them. The Teft family had the paper for about a century, but even then there were many Teft members. But before that, there were a lot of publishers, and then after the Teft family, there's been a handful. So, it's been a lot of different people. Not a single one has lived outside of Greenwich. So I find that very interesting for some reason. Anyway, so I have to pick what's on the cover. Counterintuitive news doesn't really move the paper. So last issue we had I don't know if I have it up here, but last issue we had there was a big fire in Victory, which is nearby town. We do have a lot of subscribers in Schuylerville and such, and a lot of local fire departments, including Greenwich and others, responded to that. So it was a big story, and that was considered news. And I liked having news on the cover, but I just got the returns of the paper from the newsstands because I delivered this new paper to the newsstands, and it really didn't move all that well. And I think in this era where people get the news on Facebook, it's one and done. They get the news, and then it's old news. So putting news on the cover, like breaking news, a lot of people say, hey, you should have more news on the cover, but it really doesn't move newspapers. So my idea with the newspaper is to make it more of a salon where there's more habit-forming content and a stable of writers that you might like one or two or three of, and some syndicated content, and then it might be habit-forming. And so that's kind of my idea with it, and a little bit less timely, because even if we were weekly, it still would be old news and things wouldn't move. And I think, there are weekly papers in our region that seem to be suffering, and they're still trying to use that old model as if we don't know what the news is. We've gotten all this before. So my idea on the cover is to make something that kind of represents us at this moment in time, but isn't tied to oh, I didn't know that, because everyone knows what the breaking news is. They get it on their social media. Even people that are 80 years old are getting it on their social media. So it's not like we need to do that as much. We can put it in there for the record, but we don't need to put that in there as much. So that's kind of my philosophy on it. So the Bat and Kill Country Club is celebrating its 100th, and all right, that might move some newspapers, have some historic photos in there, and it's interesting. It's an important moment in their history. A lot of people have probably touched the country club in some way or another at one point. So, and there's a lot of names in it. They say names make the news, so it's a good local story. Down here, okay, so we did have a town board meeting. But I only put a little reefer on here. That's called a reefer in the newspaper business. Not like the smokable reefer, but like as far as reefer. And this reefer, um, I put it on here, but I didn't put a photo or anything because most of the meeting was about the same old thing that they've been talking about many times, a park that's happening on the Hudson River that's been going on for several years now. So, it's been moving at a glacial pace. So I didn't give it a photo or anything. That wouldn't really shock anyone to if I put it here, for example, no one would care. When something's actually done, all right, we'll give it a little bit more of a priority. But we did put it on page 3, which is a good place, and people like the town board coverage. Bob Henke, his nature column is a draw, and when Bob joined us, we saw a little uptick in subscriptions. So it's he was a longtime columnist for the Post-Star, which is pretty much dead in this region at this point. But it was a daily paper, and it was a good feature, so we're happy to have him on board. So mention that, put a little picture of what his, if he has a good photo, I'll put it in there. Um, he goes out and does a nature column, so this ancient animals that are in our area is his angle this time. Greenwich Library did a summer reading list. Now, Greenwich is a place with a lot of different people. Some people are readers, some people might not be readers. I have to take that into account when putting it together. Some people want universal content that might be more national in nature. Some people want local content. It's timely in that our librarian locally, Sarah Murphy, wrote last issue about how she mentioned that the Chicago Sun-Times got in trouble for formulating a summer book list that was fabricated by AI, and they didn't vet it. Well, I vet the newspaper and I check things, and Sarah and I had the same idea. Like, why would they use a AI summer book list when your local library can write a summer book list for you? So that was the thought behind that, and I grabbed the best looking cover. It's a little gaudy, but the best looking cover to use as an example of their book list. But you have to get local too. These kids are going to grow up in the picture, and there's the historic aspect of the paper. We're founded in 1842, like I said, and so the Cub Scouts and local school children, they hung out with vets on Flag Day, and that's important too. It's an important moment in time. It shows like what small communities are about, and I thought that was kind of important to put on the cover. So those were my cover choices. Love them or leave them. That's up to you, but I think they were good choices based upon what's inside. So what is inside? We picked up this Salem Press story of bears in Salem, and I put it in the Greenwich edition as well because hey, these bears could come to Greenwich, but we have bears in Greenwich every now and then. The Daughters of the American Revolution, they honored Wayne Perkins, who's well known in the area, and Sidney Nichols covered the town board meeting that was mentioned. Here's that Flag Day story. Flower show's coming. This flower show is actually kind of popular, so I thought I'd give it some space. Inside the paper, here's that bat and kill story with a bunch of historic photos. Now, the quality of the photos, they were reprints from this book right here. So the quality was mixed. I couldn't put in all the photos that I had wanted because some just were kind of grainy. This one's kind of grainy. But it's from 1928, and Kim Gannon, who I think is famous as the writer of I'll Be Home for Christmas, but it's not mentioned in the article, won a golf tournament in 1928, so I thought that had some historic value. All right, our In Good Faith column, I gave an ad to, it's getting blanked out a little bit, that's just a quirk in the program, to the Alzheimer's Walk, a free ad for them. Hopefully you can attend on the 22nd. On the square, Lance Wang's popular column. He and Bob Henke probably have the biggest following of the columnists in the paper. Bunch of blurbs about theater programs and such coming up, classical musicians, etc. Marty Wendell, the country performer, has a new album that he's dropping. The guy doesn't stop. We got this obituary, rest in peace, Alan George Henderson, last second, just before we were going to print. So I swapped out, I had kind of like a house ad. It's generic ad. It's a paper call ad. So we'd only make money if someone actually calls that number. So if you want a generic generator, call that number and you can get it. So I pulled that ad and put the obituary in so we can get it in. Kinky Boots is coming up, and the lecture on Lafayette. Some legal ads. Salem crash. Here's something that a journalist does. The person who was in the accident, one of the people was named James Nolan of Salem, and there's a James Nolan of Greenwich. So this is where a local newspaper editor would kind of know, all right, maybe I should ask, did they make a mistake? Is it which James Nolan is it? So if your name's James Nolan, just make sure you say what town you're from. The al fresco dinner. Last year at the al fresco dinner, I showed up and I announced that we would be doing what's called the Salem Press. So that was good news. Our Through the Decades has been back the past couple issues. My daughter has been writing it, and we fit it all on one page, this one, and I pulled an old ad. There was one blurb. See, she is younger and doesn't even live in the town anymore, but it doesn't really keep track as to who's who. There was one from, I don't know, maybe 60 years ago. Like the Through the Decades are every, we pick like a date from this time, like 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever. And there was one from 60 years ago, I think, or maybe, yeah, where someone died in a very tragic way, and I won't say what, but died in a tragic way. And sometimes these pieces are a little tongue-in-cheek because we're looking back at them and we go, oh, I can't believe people did that way back when. And but if the people are still with us, or if their family is still with us in the area, and that's where a local editor can kind of come in, it really, you shouldn't maybe mention it. Like if we're doing, like, let's say 1985, which would be 40 years ago, and someone, they were a teenager at that time and they committed some embarrassing crime, should we put that in there if they're still living in this area and they've moved on from that? So sometimes we have to be a little bit careful with what we put in there. And there was one my daughter put in of an unusual death, and that person, the name is someone whose name is still in our local area, and it's a person. So I assume since it was maybe from 60 years ago and the person who died was a little bit older, maybe it was the father or grandfather of someone who lives locally. And do they really want to see like that mentioned in the paper? So I cut it and I put this ad for Plum eyeglasses instead, which was, they had locations in Greenwich and Cambridge. Speaking of which, I need a new pair of eyeglasses. I put this. I put a couple of stories from the Salem Press in the general edition. There might be people interested. Here's that story in Ancient Wildlife by Bob Henke. Always an interesting. He has a good following. Syndicated content. Some people like the syndicated content. I did a poll on Substack, and most people like it. I think it helps fill out the paper. And honestly, if I didn't have the syndicated content, I would just cut pages. So we're 40 pages. I would just cut it down to 32 pages. And so the syndicated content is free for you. So it's not like it's taking away from anything. It's not like there's 8 pages of random content I can go out there and find. But I kind of like it. If I'm sitting on the beach or something, I like reading these syndicated pieces. Here's the book review, and the library sent me some book cover images, and I went and found the other ones. And there's no law, there's no copyright law about if you're writing a review using the cover of the photo. So, that's the other thing a local editor might do that someone on Facebook doesn't have to do. They can just publish, they can just steal people's work, and I try not to do that. Um, everything I make sure is like public domain, or we have permission to use it, or something like that. Dairy Princes and the Alternates named. This was actually the cover story on the Salem Press, so it's also on the Eagle, their cover story too. So that's where they went with those. A little review of a gallery work, and Humor Hotel's another syndicated column. But people like it. They tell me they like it. I like it. All right, the comics and puzzles. If I ever make a mistake on these pages, people let me know. So, like, let's say I accidentally left the puzzle from the last issue in and forgot to change it, I'll hear about that. Or if I put the wrong clues down here, sometimes the syndication service gives me the wrong clues. So what I do is I learned my lesson. I'll actually do part of the puzzle, and I'll say like, all right, let's look at number. I don't know what a T in masala chai is, but let's say 10 is partner. 10 across is partner, and there's 4 letters. So I'll look at the solution, and here it is, mate. A partner is a mate. So, and then I'll say, okay, so I got the right puzzle and the right solution. Another syndicated column. I put those more towards the back. Another obituary. And then some news and notes. The Old Newbie column. That's our column written by Eric Cuffs about like the perspective of transplants. Transplants sometimes get a short shrift locally. Sometimes I don't know if I'm a local or a transplant. And then the back cover of Wally's. And this is just old stuff. This is page 40 and where we ended. And I just have old stuff over here from previous issues. So go to Wally's, have a nice dinner. This is a nice ad. And then on the bottom of their ad, they put, like, they had 6th graders from the local school create mock ads for them. They're kind of cute. So those are ads. See, a 6th grader is better at designing ads than you. So these are kids are adept with technology. So a lot of people say kids aren't as smart as they used to be. No, they're just differently smart. And they made some nice ads. So cute. All right, well, that's it. I better finish this. So you can subscribe to this paper if you don't already at jpsubs.com.